Hey y'all, with MCAT season coming up, I wanted to take a second to talk about all of the different resources and tips that I used for each section when I was studying for the MCAT last year as a 510 plus MCAT score. Starting out with the Chem section, I used quite a few different YouTube videos and YouTube channels to really understand the content that I was learning. Layup for Sci, Lifesaver, Ninja Nerd, and the Khan Academy videos were all great resources that really broke down concepts and made them a lot easier to understand. I also used Anki throughout my entire MCAT prep, but I cannot stress enough, don't just memorize the things that you're learning on Anki, actually understand where they're coming from and how to break them down. For Chem Phys, there's a lot of equations and units that you need to remember and memorize, but just memorizing them I found was ineffective for me because I forgot them a lot of the time and I forgot them quickly. So actually understanding where the equations are coming from, what they're used for, all of the units, all of the variables really helps hammer those concepts home for me. Another tip for Chem Phys is for these equations that you're going to be utilizing, you really want to know how to manipulate them to solve for one variable and solve for all of the variables. So make sure you are studying how to manipulate these equations and practicing that. Moving on to the cards section, I can't stress enough, practice, practice, practice. The way that you're going to get good at cards is by repeatedly doing passages and exposing yourself to a variety of passages. I think it's also really important to find a strategy that works for you. There's a ton of different strategies on YouTube. I think Khan Academy has their own strategy, Kaplan has strategies. Just find one that works for you and find one that you can see a consistent score increase with. And lastly, another tip for cards that I found really helpful is to read in your free time. I personally really like reading in my free time, but I found that when I was reading in my free time and reading things that I enjoy, it made cards passages a little bit more enjoyable because you're so used to reading that they come a little bit more naturally and you read faster. Moving on to biochem, my number one tip for this would be to get really comfortable with different biochemical pathways. You're really going to want to understand all of the different compounds, how different pathways connect, and a really big picture of everything. I found that Ninja Nerd had really great videos for this specifically. For biochem, I also think that active recall plays a really big role in helping you keep the information long term. After each chapter that I read in biology, biochemistry, I would always get my whiteboard out and write down absolutely everything that I remembered, and then go back to my book and fill in any details that I might have missed the first time around. Also for this section, once again, you're going to want to find a strategy that works for you. For me personally, I really liked passage mapping, which basically means reading the passage and then writing some key notes and kind of like mind mapping essentially while you're reading the passage. Moving on to Psych Soc, the last section, I really enjoyed using Anki for this one, especially the Pink Out deck and the Miles Down deck. I think they have really good cards in there and it helps you memorize. Another helpful tip for this section for me is finding clever ways to memorize things and finding clever ways to find connections between different concepts and also being able to differentiate between concepts that sound similar but may not be the same thing. And lastly, for this section, I really enjoyed listening to the Jack Weston podcast. It was super helpful, had a lot of great information, and every time I listened to it, I always found at least one question on my next practice exam that was directly addressed on the Jack Weston podcast. So make sure to check that out. But these are just some of my tips for each section. Hopefully you find them helpful, and feel free to drop any questions in the comments or DM me. Best of luck.